Them. Tried to. Her lips grazed the corner of his mouth, warm, reckless smelling of champagne, before James Matthews caught her by the shoulders and held her back like she was a live wire. Victoria Winters, his boss, the youngest CEO in the company's history, and she had just tried to kiss the man who worked for her. James looked her dead in the eyes and said the words that would change everything between them. "If you were sober right now, I would have made the first move." Then he walked away. Walking away from Victoria Winters. That was never going to be the end of anything. Drop the name of your city. In the comments, I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You don't want to miss what happens next. The office party was James Matthews' least favorite event of the year. Not because he didn't appreciate free food or an open bar. Lord knows on his salary he appreciated both. But parties like this one, the kind with jazz quartets, and servers in white gloves, and women in dresses that cost more than his monthly rent, made him feel exactly what he was, a man out of place. He stood near the far edge of the rooftop terrace, nursing a glass of sparkling water, watching the Chicago skyline glitter against the November dark. 41 floors up, the wind was sharp enough to cut, but James preferred it out here. Preferred the cold to the suffocating warmth inside, where his colleagues laughed a little too loudly and said things they didn't mean, with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. He checked his phone. 9:47 p.m. Lily had sent him a text at 9, "Good night, Daddy." "Mrs. Henderson said I could have ice cream since you weren't home. Don't be mad, love you." He smiled at the screen. 8 years old and already negotiating like a lawyer. She got that from her mother. He typed back quickly. "No more than one scoop. Tell Mrs. Henderson I said so, and I love you too, baby girl," and slid the phone back into his jacket pocket. He should go home. He'd shown his face, had the required 2 conversations with people whose names he'd had to remind himself of, and eaten exactly 1 piece of shrimp from a passing tray. That was enough. He pushed off the railing and turned toward the exit. That's when he heard it. A sharp, high laugh. Too sharp. The kind of laugh that comes out wrong when someone has had too much to drink and is trying very hard to look like they haven't. Victoria Winters was laughing at something Jeffrey Park from legal was saying, and the laugh didn't belong to her. James had heard Victoria laugh exactly 3 times in the 6 months he'd worked for her. Once, when Lily had called the office phone by accident and said, "Sorry, I was trying to reach my dad, not a stranger." Once, during a pitch meeting, when the client's dog escaped from his bag and climbed onto the conference table, and once quietly, almost to herself, when James had landed a tagline so good she'd read it twice, and then looked up at him like he'd surprised her. Those were real laughs. This wasn't. He didn't mean to walk toward her. His feet just started moving. Victoria was standing in a small cluster of people near the bar. Jeffrey, 2 women from the marketing team whose names James couldn't recall, and Daniel Zhao from the board, who was old enough to be Victoria's grandfather and had the energy of a man who had never once in his life been told no. "There he is," Victoria said, spotting James. Before he'd quite decided whether to approach or retreat, she lifted her champagne glass in his direction. "James, come here." Jeffrey was just telling the most spectacular story about a client dinner in Tokyo. James came to a stop at the edge of the group. "Miss Winters, Victoria." She said it with the particular sharpness she reserved for the times he was being what she called unnecessarily formal. "How many times?" "At company events at least twice," he said. Jeffrey laughed. The marketing women laughed. Even Daniel Zhao smiled, though his eyes stayed flat. Victoria looked at James over the rim of her glass. Her dark eyes were slightly unfocused, not dangerously so, but enough. The kind of enough that a person who'd worked closely with someone for 6 months would notice immediately. "You were about to leave," she said. "I was going to say goodnight." "You were going to escape," she turned to Jeffrey. "He does this. Disappears before anyone can stop him. I've had to track him down twice in the parking garage." "That was work-related," James said. Everything is work-related with you." She said it lightly, but something in her eyes wasn't light at all. Daniel Zhao chose that moment to make his excuses and drift away, which left the four of them. And then Jeffrey's phone rang, and he stepped back with an apologetic grimace. And then the two marketing women seemed to sense something, the particular atmospheric shift of a conversation becoming private, and they peeled away with their drinks. Suddenly, it was just the two of them standing beside the bar on a November rooftop in Chicago, and the jazz quartet inside had switched to something slow. "You should drink some water," James said. Victoria looked at the champagne in her hand, like she'd forgotten it was there. "Probably." She didn't set it down. "How many of those have you had?" "That's not a question employees ask their bosses, James. I'm asking as someone who's going to feel responsible if you fall off this terrace." She looked at him for a moment. Then she laughed, and this one was real. Small and surprised, the kind that slipped out before she could catch it. She set the champagne glass on the bar behind her. "3, she said. "Maybe 4. Jeffrey kept handing them to me, and it seemed rude to refuse. Jeffrey, from legal, is not your friend." "No," she agreed. "He is not." She leaned back against the bar and crossed her arms, looking out at the skyline. Do you ever get tired of being the smartest man in the room, James?" He blinked. "I beg your pardon. You always know what people want, what they're after. You figured out the Donovan account in 48 hours when our whole team had been spinning their wheels for 3 weeks. You knew the Chen proposal was dead before the meeting even started." She glanced at him sideways. "You know Jeffrey from legal isn't my friend. You know I've had too much champagne. You always know." James was quiet for a moment. "I pay attention." "Why?" He thought about Lily, about the mortgage, about the job he'd had before this one that paid $11 less an hour and required twice the commute and offered nothing close to the insurance plan that was currently covering Lily's asthma treatments. "Because it matters," he said simply. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. The wind moved through her hair. Dark pulled back tonight in a way that struck him as more vulnerable than her usual boardroom precision. She looked younger out here. She was younger than him by 4 years, a fact he sometimes forgot and then remembered at inconvenient moments. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "You're my boss. You can tell me whatever you want." "Off the record." She said it quietly. James looked at her. He should have said there is no off the record between an employee and a CEO. He should have picked up her champagne glass and handed it back and said something professionally appropriate about getting her a car. "Okay," he said instead. Victoria exhaled. "I didn't want to come tonight. I never want to come to these things. I come because Daniel Zhao expects it, and because half the board thinks I'm too young for this position. And I can't afford to look like I can't handle the social side of the job." She paused. You know what it's like to be looked at and immediately underestimated." "I have some experience with that, yes." She looked at him quickly, and something in her expression said she'd heard what was underneath his words, the particular weight of a black man in a predominantly white corporate space. And she didn't look away from it. "I'm sorry," she said, "that I can't make it easier. You didn't create the system." "No, but I run a piece of it." She held his gaze. "I think about that sometimes. Whether I'm doing enough, whether you specifically, you are being given what you deserve here." James felt something shift in his chest, something he immediately worked to put back in its place. "You're doing fine," he said. "You're doing better than fine." James. Victoria. Her name in his mouth felt different than Miss Winter's, more careful, more honest. "You took a chance on me when nobody else would. I was submitting portfolios into the void, and you pulled one out and called me personally. You don't need to apologize for anything." She was looking at him in a way that made him acutely aware of the distance, or lack of distance, between them.
The jazz quartet finished their song. Somewhere behind them, glass clinked against glass. And then, Victoria leaned forward and kissed him. It was not aggressive. It was not dramatic. It was soft and warm and startled, like she hadn't fully decided to do it until she was already doing it.
Her lips caught the corner of his mouth, and her hand came up and pressed flat against his chest. And James felt his whole body go absolutely still. For exactly 2 seconds he didn't move, and then he caught her gently by the shoulders and stepped back, creating 2 feet of November air between them. Victoria blinked. Her eyes cleared slightly, the sudden adrenaline cutting through the champagne. "James, don't." His voice came out low and even, which surprised him because nothing about what was happening inside him was low or even. "I didn't." She pressed her fingers to her mouth. "I shouldn't have done that." "No," he agreed. But he didn't move further away. She looked at him. Her eyes searched his face with the same focused attention she gave to quarterly projections and market analyses. Looking for data, looking for information. He met her gaze and made himself say it, the thing that was true and dangerous, and the only honest thing available to him in that moment. "If you were sober right now," James said quietly, "I would have made the first move." Victoria went completely still. He stepped back again. Professional distance. Necessary distance. "I'll call you a car," he said. "Give me 5 minutes." And he walked away. Underscore, 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 underscore. He didn't sleep. He lay on his back in the dark of his apartment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sound of Lily breathing through the baby monitor on his nightstand, a habit he'd kept long past the age when most parents would have switched it off because there was nothing in the world that settled him, like the sound of his daughter breathing. She was fine. She was safe. The world was still the world. He, on the other hand, had just told his boss, the woman who signed his performance reviews, who had the authority to eliminate his position with a 10-minute phone call, who was the youngest CEO in the 90-year history of Whitmore, and associates, that he would have kissed her first. James put his arm over his face. He had spent the better part of 6 months being extremely careful, not because he'd walked through the door on day one, and thought this woman is dangerous to me, though, in retrospect, he maybe should have, but because Victoria Winters operated on a frequency that his whole system seemed to recognize without his permission. She was precise and demanding, and occasionally relentless, and she had zero patience for work that wasn't excellent, and she remembered everything, every detail, every conversation, every number. And James, who had spent years feeling invisible in rooms that were supposed to value his contribution, had found himself unexpectedly seen. That was the problem. Not that she was beautiful, though she was. Not that she was powerful, though she was that too. The problem was that she looked at him like he mattered. And she'd been doing it since the day she'd called him personally 6 months ago, to offer him a position she hadn't even officially posted yet. "I've been watching your freelance work," she'd said. No preamble, no small talk. "The Archer campaign, the Holloway Foundation rebrand. That's your thinking, isn't it? Not just execution." He'd said yes. Good. "Because I don't need executors. I have plenty of those. I need someone who sees the thing behind the thing." He'd accepted the position within the hour. Now he lay in his dark apartment and thought about the weight of her hand on his chest and the startled softness of that almost kiss, and the way she'd looked at him afterward, not with embarrassment or manipulation or calculation, but with the raw expression of someone who had surprised themselves. He thought, "I could resign." He thought, "I will not resign." Lily's school, the insurance, the mortgage. He thought, "I am in serious trouble." He reached over and turned off the baby monitor, waited, listened until he could faintly hear Lily's breathing through the thin wall between their rooms, and stared at the ceiling until 4 a.m. Underscore, 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 underscore. She was already in the office when he arrived at 7:45. James had expected this. Victoria Winters was constitutionally incapable of avoidance. He'd watched her walk into 3 rooms this month alone, that he personally would have paid not to enter. She faced things. It was one of the things about her that he respected most and found most inconvenient. She looked up from her desk when he knocked on the open glass door. She was holding a coffee cup in both hands. She looked like she had also not slept. "Come in," she said. "Close the door." He did both. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The morning light was coming through the east-facing windows, and it was doing something to the room, filling it with the particular clarity of early hours, the kind where everything looks too honest. "How's your head?" he asked. "I've had worse." She set down the coffee. "James, about last night." "I think we should talk about it," he said. "Clearly, so there's no ambiguity." She nodded once. "Agreed." He'd rehearsed this on the train. He pulled it out now carefully. What happened last night was... He paused. Choose words. An emotional moment. At the end of a long event, with contributing factors. He met her eyes. "I don't think it should define our working relationship. And I don't think you want it to either." Victoria looked at him steadily. "No," she said. "I don't." "Then I'd like to suggest we establish some clarity between us. Professional boundaries, clear ones." "Agreed. And I'd like to stay." He paused. "If that's still available to me." Something moved across her face. Something she chose not to name out loud. "Of course it is. Nothing has changed on my end in terms of your position here." She held his gaze. "And James, what you said last night. The second part." He waited. "I heard it," she said. "And I want you to know that I'm holding it with the same care you're asking me to hold everything else." The room was very quiet. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you," she said, "for calling me a car." He almost smiled. "You're welcome." She picked up her coffee again, opened a folder on her desk, looked back at him, with the particular focused expression that meant they were back in the world of work, and the other world, the rooftop, the champagne, the almost kiss. And the words that followed was being carefully, mutually placed in a drawer. "The Callahan campaign kickoff is Monday," she said. "I'd like you to lead the creative brief. I'll have a draft to you by end of day Friday," he said. She nodded. He turned for the door. "James." He stopped. "For what it's worth," Victoria said quietly, not looking up from her folder. "I've never had an employee tell me the truth the way you do. I hope that doesn't change." He stood in the doorway for just a moment longer than he should have. "It won't," he said. And he meant it in more ways than one. Underscore, 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 underscore. The weeks that followed had a shape to them, regular, predictable on the surface, complicated underneath. The Callahan campaign became the center of their professional universe. It was a rebranding project for a century-old manufacturing company, trying to reposition itself for a new generation of buyers. And it was exactly the kind of work that James was built for, the gap between what a company was and what it needed to become, and the narrow, precise bridge of language and imagery that connected them. They worked late. That was simply the reality of the campaign's timeline and scope. By the third week, it wasn't unusual for James to look up and realize the office had emptied around them, that the cleaning crew had come and gone, that the sky outside the windows had cycled from sunset to full dark. In those hours, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., the quiet end of working days, the conversation moved. It started with work. It always started with work. A headline that wasn't landing. A visual concept that needed rethinking. The particular client note that required careful translation between what had been said and what had been meant. But somewhere between the work and the drive home, things drifted. She told him about growing up in Evanston, about her father, who had been a systems engineer and believed in preparation with almost religious conviction, who had drilled young Victoria on market analysis and quarterly reports the way other fathers drilled multiplication tables. "He wanted me ready," she said one evening, not looking up from her laptop. "For every room, for every objection, for every person who was going to tell me I was too young, too female, too new to be taken seriously." James was quiet for a moment. "Did it work?" "Define work." She looked up. "I can hold my own in any room. I can dismantle any argument. I can run a company that didn't want me to run it." She paused. But I don't know how to be in a room and not be performing being in the room. Does that make sense?"
Yes, he said. It does. She looked at him curiously. What about you? What does James Matthews, when nobody's watching, look like? He thought about Lily's homework spread across the kitchen table. About Saturday mornings when they made pancakes, and she stood on her step stool and poured too much syrup, and he pretended not to notice.
About the particular quiet of 10 p.m. when Lily was asleep, and the apartment was still, and he sat on the couch with a book, or sometimes just with the silence, grateful for it. "Quieter," he said. "Smaller. In the good way." She tilted her head. "Tell me about Lily." He told her, not everything, but more than he usually told people who were also his employer. He told her about the day Lily was born 2 weeks early in the middle of a February blizzard, when he'd driven to the hospital in near zero visibility, and cried in the parking structure afterward alone from the sheer relief of making it. He told her about the first year after his marriage ended, the divorce that had been mutual and necessary, and still one of the hardest things he'd ever survived, and about learning to do this thing, parenthood, in the way that suddenly meant being both things at once, all the time with no backup. Victoria listened the way she did everything completely. No distracted nodding, no reaching for her phone. Just her full, undivided attention. "She sounds like you," she said when he'd finished. "She's better than me," he said. "Parents always say that." Maybe. But in this case, it's true. Victoria smiled, the small, real kind, and looked back at her screen. But he caught the expression on her face before it closed, something soft, and a little wistful, the look of someone encountering something they hadn't known they wanted to encounter. He filed it away in the drawer. Next to everything else, the drawer was getting crowded. Underscore, 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 underscore. On a Thursday in late October, Lily called the office line at 4:17 p.m. James picked up, saw the school number, felt the familiar spike of parental adrenaline. "Dad!" Lily's voice was careful, steady the way she got when she was working hard not to cry. "I'm fine. I fell on the playground, and my knee is kind of bad, and Mrs. Henderson isn't answering, and I don't know what to do." "Stay at the front office," he said immediately, already pushing back from his desk. "Don't move. I'm coming." He hung up and grabbed his jacket. Victoria was in the hallway outside his office, apparently returning from a meeting, and she stopped when she saw his face. "What happened?" "My daughter. Minor thing, I think, but I need to go." She said it immediately without calculation, without the slight pause he'd braced for. "Go right now. I'll cover the 5 p.m. check-in with Callahan. Victoria, that meeting is—" "Go, James." He went. Lily's knee required 6 stitches and a bandage in the shape of a dinosaur that the pediatric nurse had produced with the efficiency of someone who had done this 10,000 times. She was brave all the way through the stitches, and then cried in the car quietly, while James drove with one hand and held her hand with the other. "You came so fast," she said. "I always come," he said. "You know that." "I know," she sniffled. "Dad?" "Yeah, baby." "Your boss, is she nice?" He glanced in the rearview mirror. "Why do you ask? Because you talk about work different since you started there? You sound less tired." James stared at the road for a moment. "She's a good boss," he said carefully. "That's not what I asked," Lily said with the unsettling precision of an 8-year-old who had inherited her father's attention to language. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll make soup when we get home." Lily, wise enough to know when she'd gotten as much as she was going to get, leaned her head against the window. James drove home through the October dark and thought about the way Victoria had said, "Go not okay," or "of course," or "keep me posted, just go." As if his daughter mattered to her because his daughter mattered to him. He thought about the drawer. He thought, this is going to be a problem. He drove home, He made soup. He sat beside Lily's bed until she fell asleep. And for the first time in 6 months, he let himself just briefly, just quietly in the privacy of the dark stop, pretending he didn't already know exactly what kind of problem it was going to be. Underscore, 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 underscore. If you're still watching from wherever you are in America, drop your city below. I want to see every single one of you. And we're just getting started. The drawer didn't stay closed. That was the thing James hadn't fully accounted for, the way feelings, when denied a door, find a window. He'd been careful. He'd been deliberate. He'd constructed the professional version of himself every morning, like putting on armor, piece by piece, before walking into Whitmore. And associates. And for the most part, it held. For the most part. The Callahan campaign hit its midpoint in the second week of November, and with it came the kind of pressure that stripped away everything unnecessary. Deadlines had a way of doing that, burning off the performative layers, until what was left was just the work and the people doing it. And when it was just James and Victoria in the conference room at 9 p.m. with cold takeout containers and a whiteboard covered in half-finished ideas, the armor got heavier, harder to maintain. "This isn't working," Victoria said, standing back from the board. She had her arms crossed and her head tilted, and she was looking at the campaign's central concept. The way she looked at things, she was about to take apart. The whole legacy meets tomorrow angle. It's been done. It was done in 2019. It was done in 2017. It was done probably in 1987, and someone just didn't have the PowerPoint to prove it. "The client loves it," James said. "The client loved it in the room because we presented it well. When they sit with it for 2 weeks, they're going to start seeing it for what it is." She turned. "What do you think?" "Not what the client thinks." "What do you think?" James leaned back in his chair and looked at the board. The honest answer had been sitting in the back of his mind for 3 days, quiet and patient, waiting for exactly this question. "I think Callahan's real story isn't about where they're going," he said. "It's about what they refused to give up. 96 years. They survived the Depression. They survived the outsourcing wave in the 90s. They survived 2008. Every competitor they ever had is either gone or unrecognizable. And Callahan's still making the same product in the same county where they started." He paused. "That's not legacy. That's stubbornness. The good kind. The kind that means something." Victoria stared at him. Then she picked up the eraser and wiped the entire board clean with 3 long strokes. "Say that again," she said. "Slower." He said it again. She wrote as he talked. By 10:30, they had the bones of something real. A campaign built around the word uncompromising, around the particular quiet pride of a company that had made a choice, over and over again, to stay exactly what it was. "This is it," Victoria said, stepping back again. Her voice had that particular quality it got when something locked into place lower, certain the sound of a decision being made. "This is the campaign? Assuming the client agrees. The client will agree." She turned and looked at him with an expression that was both direct and somehow unguarded. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Find the real thing. The thing underneath the thing." She shook her head slightly. "I've worked with people twice your experience level who couldn't do what you just did in 20 minutes. James held her gaze and chose his words with the same precision he applied to everything. "I grew up having to read rooms quickly, figure out what was really being said versus what was being performed." He let that settle. "Turns out it's the same skill in the end." She was quiet for a moment. "I know what you mean," she said. "More than you might think. I know you do." That was the thing, sitting in that conference room with the city dark outside, and the whiteboard finally saying something true. They understood each other. Not perfectly, not completely, but in the specific way that mattered. The kind where you didn't have to build context from scratch every time, where the other person caught the meaning before the sentence was finished. James had had that with his ex-wife once, before everything had slowly and mutually broken down. He hadn't had it since. He hadn't expected to find it here. Victoria's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, and something in her face shifted. Small controlled, but James caught it. "Oh, board prep," she said. "I have to take this. I'll pack up the notes." He was gathering his things when her voice dropped behind him, turned away to face the window. He wasn't trying to listen. He listened anyway. "I'm aware of the concerns, Daniel." A pause. "No, I understand the optics. I've always understood the optics." Another pause longer. Her voice was level, but he knew that levelness now, knew it was the sound of someone holding something very steady under significant pressure. "I'll have a full update to the board before end of month. That's my commitment." She hung up. He didn't turn around until he heard her set the phone down. "Everything okay?" he asked. She smiled, the public-facing one polished and untroubling. "Fine. Ready to call it a night." He didn't push. She hadn't asked him to. But he filed it, the way he filed everything, and carried it home along with the rest. The Callahan campaign presentation landed on a gray Tuesday morning, and it went the way James had known it would. The room tilted in the first 15 minutes. He'd given Victoria the framework, and she'd built the room around it, and together they walked Callahan's VP of brand through something that didn't feel like a pitch so much as a mirror. By the end, the VP was leaning forward. By Quanda, he was finishing their sentences. They got the full budget approved inside an hour. Walking back through the lobby afterward, Victoria said nothing for half a block. Then she turned to him and said, "Dinner, tonight. The team is going to Mercado, and you are coming, and I will not accept Lily needs me as an excuse, because I already know Mrs. Henderson is available on Tuesdays." James stopped walking. "How do you know Mrs. Henderson's schedule?" "You mentioned it 3 weeks ago." "I pay attention too, James." He looked at her. She looked back. There was something almost defiant in her expression, like she was daring him to make it a thing. "Dinner," he said. "Fine. Thank you." She said it primly and started walking again. He followed and didn't examine too carefully the fact that he was smiling. Mercado was loud, in the best way the noise of a successful team, releasing a month's worth of pressure over good food and cold drinks. Marcus from design ordered too much guacamole, and nobody complained. Elena from copy made a toast that was genuinely funny, and ended with a callback to the pitch that made even the quieter members of the team laugh. James sat at the end of the table and felt for the first time in a long time that specific warmth of belonging, of being not just employed by a team, but part of one. Victoria sat across from him 3 seats down, and she was different here than she was in the office. Still precise, still fully present, but lighter around the edges. She laughed at Marcus's impression of the Callahan VP. She listened to Elena's story about her mother's birthday with genuine interest and asked a follow-up question 2 minutes later that proved she'd actually retained it. She caught James watching her at one point and raised an eyebrow. He lifted his water glass in a small, deliberate toast. She looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. Then she looked away. But the corner of her mouth moved. He drove home at 10:30 with the windows down, despite the cold, and he didn't analyze it. He just let the night air come in. He should have been paying more attention to Caroline Davis. He'd noticed her, of course. It would have been impossible not to. Caroline was the director of client strategy, Victoria's approximate equal in seniority, below the C-suite. And she operated with the particular efficiency of someone who understood that attention was a resource to be managed. She was good at her job. James had seen the evidence of it in the accounts she managed, in the way clients spoke about her, in meetings, in the organized precision of her work. What he hadn't fully mapped was the particular way she watched. Not at things, around them. The peripheral awareness of someone who was always calculating the angle. He noticed it first, at the Callahan debrief, a week after the presentation. Caroline had come in at the end as the room was wrapping up, and she'd said the right things, great result team well executed. But her eyes had moved between James and Victoria in a way that snagged at the edge of his attention like a loose thread. He noticed it again in the elevator when he and Victoria were talking about the post-campaign timeline. And Caroline stepped in on the 14th floor and went very still for a moment, The way a person goes still when they've heard something they weren't expected to hear. "Caroline," Victoria said easily, "did you get the Callahan recap I sent?" "I did. Impressive numbers." Caroline smiled. It was a good smile, practiced warm, entirely uninformative. "You two make a strong team." "Oh, James is a strong team," Victoria said. "I just point him in the right direction." "That's generous," Caroline said. "It's accurate," James said. The elevator reached the lobby. Caroline stepped out first. "We should debrief properly sometime soon, Victoria. Board's been asking about the Q1 pipeline." A pause, casual and not casual at all. "Alone when you have a moment." She walked away. James and Victoria stood in the lobby. "Alone," James said. "I heard it," Victoria said. "Do you want to tell me what that's about?" She was quiet for a moment. "Caroline had the inside track on the Callahan account before you came on board." She said it evenly. She had a different creative direction in mind, and a different team. When I redirected it to you, she accepted it professionally. She's always professional. A pause. "But Caroline Davis doesn't forget things." "Neither do you." "No," she said. "But my reasons are different." She walked toward the elevator bank. James followed, and didn't ask the obvious question what her reasons were, because he was already fairly certain he knew the answer. And having it confirmed in a corporate lobby at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday was not something he was ready for. December came in cold and fast. The office shifted into the particular end-of-year energy that James had learned to read over the past months, the combination of urgency and exhaustion that accumulated in the final quarter, when everything that hadn't been finished by November suddenly needed to be finished by December 15th, or it would slide into January and become someone else's problem. He was good in this environment. He always had been. The pressure organized him, rather than unraveling him. And Victoria had noticed it enough to say so in her direct way during a Friday afternoon debrief that had run 40 minutes long. "Most people get worse under deadline pressure," she said, gathering her notes. "You get better." "Single parenting," he said. "Every day is a deadline." She laughed. "The real one. The one that got away from her." He stored it without meaning to. "Is Lily excited for the holidays?" she asked. "Off the charts." She made a list. It is organized by category. That's either terrifying or impressive. With Lily, usually both. Victoria smiled at her desk. "Tell her I said hi." It came out simply, casually, like it was already a normal thing to say. Tell her I said hi. As if James's daughter was already someone who existed in Victoria's life, rather than just in her awareness of his. Looked at her and felt the drawer shift just slightly under the weight of what was accumulating inside it. "I'll do that," he said. He didn't nut exactly. But that evening, while Lily was doing her homework at the kitchen table, and James was reheating soup, she said out of nowhere, "Is your boss coming to the work Christmas party?" He glanced over. "Probably." "Why?" Lily shrugged, not looking up from her math sheet. "I was just thinking. If she's as nice as you make it sound when you come home, she'd probably like soup." James stood very still at the stove. "What do I sound like when I come home?" "Less tired," Lily said. "Like something good happened." He turned back to the soup and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that wouldn't be either a lie or a confirmation, and Lily was sharp enough to spot the difference. The Christmas party was smaller than the November one, an internal event, invitation only at the firm's private dining room on the 38th floor. No live jazz, no Daniel Zhao circling the edges like a slow-moving weather system. Just the core team good food and the unspoken collective agreement to be human beings for one evening instead of professionals. James was not planning to stay past 8. He arrived at 6:30 to find the room already warm and half full. He got a sparkling water, same as the last party by choice and by memory, and stationed himself near the window. Old habits. Victoria arrived at 6:48 in a dark green dress that he did not allow himself to look at for longer than was reasonable. And she moved through the room the way she always did, efficiently, purposefully, with the specific warmth she reserved for her team. He watched her stop and spend 5 real minutes with Elena, who'd just gotten back from medical leave. He watched her laugh at something Marcus said, and then immediately ask him a follow-up question, the kind that told him she remembered what he'd said last month about his mother's health. She was good at this. Better than she believed she was. She thought it was performance. He knew by now that it wasn't. She found him by the window at 7:15. "Still guarding the perimeter," she said. "Someone has to." She stood beside him, close enough that the sleeve of her dress nearly touched his jacket sleeve. Not touching. Nearly. He was acutely, exhaustingly aware of the distinction. "Good party?" he asked. "Better than November." She looked out at the city. Less political. More actual. "That's all you want. Just actual." She was quiet for a moment. "That's all anyone wants, really," she said. "You just stop expecting it after a while." He looked at her profile. She was watching the city with the particular expression he'd started to recognize as unguarded, the one she allowed when she thought no one was cataloging it. He was always cataloging it. "Can I say something?" he said. "You always ask that," she said, "and you always say it anyway." "You're better at this than you think you are," he said. "Running this. Leading people. Not the strategy part, you know you're good at that. I mean the human part. The part you think you're performing." "Wait." She turned and looked at him. "It's not a performance," he said. "You actually care about these people. Elena, Marcus, all of them." He held her gaze. "You've had a version of yourself that you built to survive, and somewhere along the way, you convinced yourself that version isn't real. But it is. It's just armored. Doesn't make it less real." The room continued around them. Glasses clinked. Someone's laugh rose and fell. The city did its endless, indifferent glittering outside. "James," Victoria said quietly. "Yeah. You're doing it again. I know. Seeing the thing behind the thing. It's what you hired me for." Something crossed her face. Something too honest, and too fast for her to redirect before he saw it. Her jaw tightened just barely. Her eyes stayed exactly on his. "What if I hired you for other reasons?" she said. He felt the air in the room shift. Not literally, specifically, between them. "Victoria." "I knew the minute I saw your portfolio," she said. Her voice was low enough that it stayed between them. "It wasn't just the work. I knew your thinking. The way you approach a problem. The way you see." She paused. "I called you before the position was posted because I didn't want to give anyone else the chance to get to you first." He didn't move. "That's a professional compliment," she said. "I know how it sounds. But I need you to know that when I hired you, my intentions were, they are completely, I know that," he said. "James, I've always known that." He kept his voice steady with a focused effort. "That's not the complicated part." Her breath came out slowly. "No," she agreed. "It's not." They stood there side by side, not touching in the warm and crowded room. It was Caroline Day who finally broke it. Not intentionally, not dramatically, just by appearing at Victoria's elbow with a drink and a colleague from the client team, and a smooth, "Victoria, I wanted to introduce you to," that pulled the moment apart at the seams as cleanly and efficiently as a letter opener. Victoria turned. The public face assembled itself in the space of a second, seamless and practiced. James took a step back, gave her room, gave himself room. He left at 8:05 as planned. He stood in the elevator going down and stared at the brushed steel doors, and felt very precisely the specific weight of wanting something he had not yet let himself fully name. That was Friday. By Monday, something had changed. He felt it the moment he walked off the elevator. There was a particular quality to the silence that greeted him, not unfriendly exactly, but aware. The kind of aware that meant people had been talking about something and had recently stopped. He got a coffee. He settled at his desk. He answered emails. Marcus came in at 9:30 to review the Callahan post-campaign metrics. And somewhere in the middle of the meeting, James noticed that Marcus was doing a thing avoiding a particular subject with the careful precision of someone navigating around a piece of furniture in the dark, knowing exactly where it is without naming it. After Marcus left, James sat very still and thought. He thought about Caroline's eyes in the elevator, about the particular efficiency of her arrival at the Christmas party, about the way she'd said alone when you have a moment, and the meaning she'd loaded into it like cargo. He thought, how long has this been going on? His phone rang. Victoria's extension. He picked up. Matthews. My office, when you have a minute. A pause. Actually now, if you can. He could. She was standing when he came in, not sitting behind her desk, but standing at the window, which was not where Victoria Winters stood when things were fine. She turned when he closed the door. I want you to hear this from me, she said, before you hear it from anyone else. James crossed his arms. His whole body went very still, the way it did when he was preparing to receive information he'd rather not have. Okay. There's a conversation happening. She said it flatly. Among some people at the board level? About this team. About this campaign. She met his eyes directly. About us. Define us in this context. The rumors are that our professional relationship is compromised. Her voice didn't waver, but he watched her hand tighten slightly at her side. That the reason you got this position, and the reason this campaign was restructured around your direction was not entirely professional. The room was quiet. Who started it? He asked. I don't have confirmation of Victoria. He said it quietly but directly. Who started it? She looked at him for a moment. I don't have confirmation, she repeated. But I have a reasonable professional assessment. Caroline Davis has a reasonable professional assessment, he said. She didn't confirm it. She didn't have to. Her silence was as precise as any answer. James uncrossed his arms. He walked to the chair across from her desk and sat down not because he was invited to, but because he needed to think, and he thought better when he wasn't standing. What is the board saying? He asked. Daniel Zhao called me this morning. He's requesting that I temporarily recuse from directly managing your work, pending a review of the account structure. She said it like each word had a weight she was choosing to carry. He framed it as protective. I heard it as what it was.
Which is pressure. She turned back to the window to demonstrate that I know where the lines are. Do you? She turned around, faster than he expected, and her eyes were sharp. Yes, she said. I know exactly where the lines are. I've been standing at them for 6 months. The honesty of that landed between them like something dropped. I know, he said. His voice came out quiet. So have I.
The morning light was doing that thing again, the early hour clarity that made everything look more honest than it was, or perhaps exactly as honest as it was. I want to resign, he said. No. She said it immediately. Victoria. No. She came around the desk and stood in front of him, and there was nothing performative or calculated in her expression. You will not lose this job because of me. You will not take Lil's insurance and her school and your future and throw it into this because my board is listening to whispers from someone who should mind her business. Her voice was fierce and low. That is not happening. Then what is happening? He asked. She held his gaze, and for a moment, she let him see all of it. The exhaustion and the frustration and the particular loneliness of being the woman at the top of a structure that still hadn't fully decided to trust her without any of the armor. I'm going to fix it, she said. My way. He looked at her. He thought about the drawer, the full heavy drawer that had been accumulating since November, since the rooftop, since, if you were sober, I would have made the first move, and he felt it press against its edges. Whatever you need from me, he said. I'm here. She nodded once. Short, decisive. The way she closed a meeting when the decision had been made. But she didn't move away, and he didn't either. And the distance between them was as it had been for months, precisely deliberately maintained. and somehow because of that more significant than closing it would have been. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it. A text from Mrs. Henderson Lilly. Asked me to tell you she wants pancakes for dinner tonight. She said you'd understand. He almost smiled. Everything okay? Victoria asked. Yeah, he said. Yeah, it is. He stood. I'll be at my desk, whatever you need. He walked back to his office, sat down, opened his laptop, started working because that was what he did, and that was what she'd hired him for. And that was the shape of the life he'd built, careful, deliberate, inch by inch. But when he looked up an hour later and saw Victoria through the glass wall of her office, standing straight phone to her earjaw, set with the particular determination of someone who had made a decision and was walking into it, he thought very clearly, I am not walking away from this. Not from the job. Not from whatever was building between them, slow and careful, and entirely undeniable. Not from her. He turned back to his screen. He had work to do. Victoria's way of fixing things turned out to be methodical, quiet, and faster than James had expected. By Wednesday of that week, she had already restructured the reporting chain on 2 active accounts, documented every decision point of the Callahan campaign, with timestamps and meeting notes going back 4 months, and submitted a formal memo to the board outlining a revised management framework that removed any direct line of evaluation between herself and James's performance reviews. She did all of it without announcing it to him, without asking for his input, and without making it feel like damage control. He found out from Marcus, who found out from someone in legal, which was how most real information moved at Whitmore and Associates. She lawyered up, Marcus said, dropping into the chair across from James's desk with the expression of a man genuinely impressed against his better judgment. Not like litigation lawyered up. More like she documented everything so thoroughly that there's nothing for anyone to actually point at. Smart, James said. It's like watching someone defuse a bomb by proving the bomb was never a bomb. Marcus paused. You doing okay because the whole office knows something's happening. The whole office always knows something's happening. Yeah, but this time, you're the something. Marcus looked at him directly. I want you to know I've talked to exactly no one. About anything. James held his gaze. I know that. Elena either. We talked about it. Whatever it is or isn't, it's not our business, and she handled the Callahan pitch the right way, and you did the work. And that's what we know. Thank you, Marcus. Marcus stood up. Also for the record, I saw the way she covered for you the day Lily got hurt. That's not nothing. He shrugged the particular shrug of a man who has made his point and doesn't intend to belabor it, just saying. He left. James sat at his desk for a moment, staring at the open file on his screen without reading it, thinking about loyalty, how rare it was, how much it mattered, how little it could be manufactured. He was still thinking about it when his desk phone rang, and the display showed an extension he didn't recognize. Matthews, he answered. Mr. Matthews. The voice was polished. Male. The specific register of a man who was accustomed to people adjusting to him. This is Daniel Zhao. I believe we've met briefly. James felt his whole body calibrate. Mr. Zhao, we have. I'm going to be direct with you, because I find directness saves everyone time. A pause calibrated for effect. I've been watching the developments on the Callahan account with great interest. Exceptional result. Your contribution has been noted by the board. Thank you. However, and there it was, the word that had been sitting in the throat of the sentence all along. Exceptional results don't occur in a vacuum. They occur in a context. And context matters to a board responsible for the health and reputation of this firm. James said nothing. He had learned over the course of a life that required navigating powerful men with agendas, that silence made them fill the space in ways that were informative. I understand you and Miss Winters have developed a close working relationship, Zhao continued. Closeness in a professional environment is not inherently problematic. But optics matter. Perceptions matter. And I want to ensure that everyone involved, including yourself, is protected." "Protected?" James repeated. He kept his voice completely neutral, from the kind of professional complications that can derail an otherwise excellent career. Zhao's voice was still smooth. "I want to be clear that nothing I'm saying constitutes any formal action or accusation. I'm simply reaching out one professional to another to have a candid conversation." "I appreciate the candor," James said. He did not mean it. "Is there something specific you'd like me to do, Mr. Zhao?" A brief pause. "Be thoughtful," Zhao said. "About the image you project. About the nature of your professional interactions. That's all I'm asking." "Of course." "Good man." The warmth in Zhao's voice was the most unsettling thing about the conversation. The particular warmth of someone who believed he was being generous. "Enjoy the rest of your day." The line went dead. James set the phone down with the careful steadiness of someone who is very, very angry and has no intention of showing it to anything that can be observed. He took a breath. He took another one. He looked at the wall of his office for approximately 30 seconds. Then he stood up, walked to Victoria's office and knocked. She looked up. She read his face in approximately 4 seconds the way she always did. "Close the door," she said. He did. He told her about the call word for word with the precision of someone who has listened carefully enough to reconstruct a conversation verbatim. Victoria listened without interrupting. Her face didn't move. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "He called you directly," she said finally. "He called me directly to be thoughtful about my image." Her voice was flat and even, and so controlled it was almost alarming. "Without using my name. Without using your name." She stood up from her desk. She walked to the window. She stood there with her back to him and her arms at her sides. And he could see from the set of her shoulders exactly what she was doing, taking it apart, analyzing it, building a response in real time. "He's doing what people do when they want to apply pressure without creating a paper trail," she said. "He's going around me to reach you directly, because he knows I've already documented everything, and he can't get traction with the formal structure." She turned. "He's betting that you're the easier point of pressure." "He might be right," James said, "under different circumstances. But not these. Not these." She held his gaze, and in it was everything that had been sitting in that drawer for months, not named, not acted on, but fully present between them like a third person in the room. "I'm handling the board," she said. "Formally. I have a meeting on Thursday. I want you to know that whatever happens in that meeting, it will not affect your position." "Victoria." "I mean it, James. Your position is not part of the negotiation." "What is part of the negotiation?" She paused. "My management scope." "Temporarily. The board wants a visible gesture. I'm going to give them one that looks like a concession but is actually a restructure that makes us more operationally sound anyway." She said it simply without drama. "It costs me very little, and it removes their leverage." He looked at her. "You've been planning this since Monday." "I've been planning this since the moment I understood what was happening." She sat back down. "I don't react. I respond." She picked up her pen, the signal that the conversation was being formally redirected. "Now, I need the cue, one pipeline overview by Thursday morning, so I can reference the forward projections in the board meeting. Can you have it to me by Wednesday, end of day ye?" "Yes," he said. He moved toward the door. "James." He stopped. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me about the call. You would have found out anyway." "Yes, but it matters that you came to me first." He held her gaze for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Then he went back to his desk and spent the rest of the day building the most thorough quarterly pipeline overview of his professional life, because that was the one thing he had clear control over. And he was not a man who handled loss of control well. The problem with being careful was that it required the world to be equally cooperative. And the world, in James's experience, was not. It was a Thursday evening. The same Thursday as Victoria's board meeting, when everything he'd been managing quietly and deliberately stopped being quiet. He was in his kitchen reheating pasta when Lily came in from the living room with a look on her face he'd never seen before. Not upset exactly. More like she'd carried something from another room that she wasn't sure what to do with. "Dad," she said. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, which she did when she was working up to something. "I heard something at school today." James kept stirring the pasta, steady. "What did you hear?" "Keisha's mom works at the same building as you." Lily said it carefully. "She was talking on the phone when she picked up Keisha, and I was right there, and she said—" She stopped, looked at the floor. "What did she say, Lily?" "She said your boss got in trouble because of you." Lily looked up. "Because you and your boss aren't." She said something about it not being appropriate, between you and your boss. She watched his face. "Is that true?" James put down the spoon. He crossed the kitchen and crouched down to Lily's level. She was 8. She had her mother's eyes, and his cheekbones, and the particular gravity of a child who had learned early that adults sometimes carried harder things than they let on. He looked at her directly the way she always asked him to, because she had once said, at age 6, "Dad, you know when grown-ups answer but look away, I know that means they're not all the way telling the truth." "The true thing," he said, "is that your dad works hard at his job and is good at his job, and some people at work are having a disagreement about how things are run. That happens in every office. It's happening in mine right now." He held her eyes. "The untrue thing is anything that says I've done something wrong. I haven't." Lily studied his face with the focus of someone running a diagnostic. "Are you going to have to leave your job?" "I don't know yet." "Would that be okay?" He thought about the insurance, about her school, about the mortgage and the car payment, and Mrs. Henderson and every single pillar of the structure he'd built quietly, brick by brick, so his daughter would never have to feel the ground shift. "We would figure it out," he said. "Same as we always do." Lily was quiet for a moment. "I don't want you to be less tired and then get sad again," she said. He felt that sentence land in his chest, like something solid. "Come here," he said. She came. He held her the way he'd held her since she was small enough to fit entirely in his arms.
And she was getting too big for that now, all elbows and indignation most of the time. But she let him, because she could always tell when he needed it as much as she did. "I'm not going to be sad," he said into her hair. "I promise." She pulled back and looked at him. "Is your boss sad?" "I don't know."
Is she going to be okay? James thought about Victoria in that board meeting alone, building her case with the meticulous precision of someone who had been preparing for this fight since long before the fight had a name. "Yes," he said. "She's going to be fine." Lily nodded, satisfied. "Okay." She turned back toward the living room. "The pasta's burning, Dad." He turned around. It was not burning. It was fine. He stirred it anyway. He called Mrs. Henderson after dinner and arranged for her to take Lily the next morning. Then he sat on the couch in the quiet apartment and made himself think through all of it clearly, without the managed distance he'd been maintaining. He laid it out like a brief: the facts, the variables, the options. The facts: rumors were in the building and apparently beyond it. Zhao had made direct contact. The board meeting had happened today, and he didn't know the outcome. Lily had heard something that had made her anxious. The variables: Victoria's response to the board, Caroline Davis's next move, whatever it was. The structural integrity of his position if the restructure held. The options: stay and trust that Victoria had this handled. Stay and prepare for whatever came next regardless. Resign now, preemptively, before the situation could do more damage to Victoria's position, to his own reputation, to Lily's sense of stability. He sat with a third option for a long time. He'd visited it before, back in the early days after the rooftop. He decided against it then. But the calculation was different now. Then, the damage was theoretical. Now it was real, and moving a real person's anxiety-filled face in his kitchen doorway, real whispers in a parking lot, a real phone call from a real man with real influence. He picked up his phone. He typed a text to Victoria. How did it go? Not a question. He rarely asked Victoria questions directly. He'd learned early that she responded better to statements that left room the same way she'd said go the day Lily got hurt, instead of course, please do that. She expressed herself more honestly when the pressure to explain was removed. 3 minutes. Then, Thursday will become Friday, and Friday will become Monday, and this is still my company. Details tomorrow. He stared at the text. Read it again. Something in his chest loosened by a degree. He typed back, good. She sent back, how's Lily? He paused. Typed, she heard some things. She's okay. A longer pause this time. Then, I'm sorry. Don't be. Go sleep. You first. He set the phone face down on the couch and sat in the dark for a while. He thought about Lily's question. Is she going to be okay? And about the certainty with which he'd answered it. Not performance. Not reassurance. Actual certainty built from 6 months of watching Victoria Winters walk into every hard room and come out the other side with her spine intact. He thought, I'm in love with her. He'd known it at some level for weeks. But there's a difference between knowing something and saying it to yourself in the quiet of a dark apartment, letting the words sit without hedging them. He was in love with Victoria Winters. He was her employee. The board was currently discussing the optics of their professional relationship. His daughter was anxious. He had a mortgage. He put his head back against the couch cushion and stared at the ceiling. Well, he said out loud to no one, that's a problem. He slept. Badly, but he slept. Victoria's version of details tomorrow turned out to be a meeting in her office at 8 a.m. sharp, before the rest of the floor filled in. She had coffee waiting, not from the office machine, but from the cart downstairs, the good kind, which was her particular form of announcement that a conversation mattered. She told him, in the precise, sequential way she communicated important information, the board meeting had lasted 2 hours. Zhao had pushed for a formal review of the Callahan campaign's internal structure. She had presented her documentation, her restructured reporting framework, and a forward projection of the Q1 pipeline that demonstrated the business case for the current team configuration, independent of any personal considerations. 3 of the 5 board members present had agreed the formal review was unnecessary. Zhao and 1 other had reserved their position, pending a 30-day monitoring period. 30-day monitoring period, James said. Standard language, Victoria said. It means they're watching, but they have no grounds to act. I'll report to the Interim Oversight Committee at the end of the month, and it will be resolved. And in the meantime, I am not directly managing your performance evaluations. Sarah Chen in Strategy is your formal reporting manager through the monitoring period. She said it evenly. This does not change your work. It does not change your access. It changes exactly 1 bureaucratic line on an org chart. And it changes how it looks, James said. Yes, which is the point. James looked at her. He thought about what it had cost her, the particular kind of woman who had built herself from the ground up, who had proven herself in every room, who had never once handed anyone ammunition to use against her to make a visible, formal concession to a board that had doubted her from the beginning. I want to resign, he said. She put down her coffee cup with a controlled, deliberate movement. James, listen to me. He leaned forward. Not because of the job. Not because I'm scared, or I want to run. Because what's happening right now is costing you, and I can see it, and it shouldn't be. You built something here. You're good at this. And you are being forced to spend political capital defending a situation that I could resolve by walking out the door. And your daughter. Victoria's voice was very quiet. Her school, her insurance, the life you have built. What does that cost? Less than watching you. He stopped, chose the word carefully. Less than watching you compromise what you've built here because of me. She stood up. She came around the desk, and she sat in the chair across from him, which she almost never did. She almost always maintained the desk between them like a geographic fact. She sat across from him now, and she looked at him directly. No desk, no distance, nothing managed. I'm going to say something, she said. And I need you to hear it as a professional statement, not as anything else, because we are in my office at 8 in the morning, and the floor is about to fill up. Okay. You are the best thing that has happened to this company in the 4 years I've run it. Not the most convenient, not the simplest, the best. She held his gaze. What you do here matters. What you will do here if you stay, and we get through this will matter more. And the board can have their 30 days. And Caroline Davis can have her moment of satisfaction, and Zhao can have his optics. But I will not accept a world where you trade Lily's security and your career for my comfort. Her jaw set. That is not a trade I'm making. It's not available. It's not your trade to make, he said. It's mine. Yes, she said. And I'm telling you, as your colleague, as the person who knows this work better than anyone, that the right choice is to stay. She held his gaze for a long moment. He held hers back. Okay, he said finally. Okay, I'm staying. She nodded once. The relief on her face was small and controlled, and entirely real. Thank you. Don't thank me. It's the rational decision. He paused. And I need to talk to Sarah Chen today about the reporting structure before she hears it from someone else. I've already briefed Sarah. She'll reach out to you before noon. Victoria stood up and moved back behind her desk, the geography of the room reasserting itself. I also need the revised deck for the Harmon proposal by Thursday. Can you? By Wednesday, he said. I'll have it to you by Wednesday. He stood. One more thing. She looked up. What you said about me being the best thing for the company. He kept his voice steady. I heard it as a professional statement. She met his eyes. Something moved across her face, that fast, unguarded thing he'd been cataloging for 6 months. Good, she said. But the way she said it meant something more than good, and they both knew it. And neither of them named it, because it was 8 in the morning, and the floor was about to fill up. He was almost out the door when he heard Caroline Davis's voice in the hallway. He stopped. She was talking to someone from legal, easy fluid, entirely relaxed, the way Caroline was always entirely relaxed, which James had come to understand as its own kind of warning. He stepped back inside and let the hallway clear. Problem? Victoria asked. Caroline, he said. Something hardened in Victoria's expression. She walked past my office twice before you arrived this morning. She said it simply without performance. She's watching to see how I respond, whether I'm rattled. Are you? I'm always rattled, she said. I just decide what to do about it before it shows. She picked up her pen. James, be careful with her. Not afraid. Careful. I'm always careful. I know. Her eyes stayed on his for just a moment. It's one of the things... She stopped. He waited. It's one of the things I've always counted on. She finished. He nodded. He left. He walked past Caroline's office on his way back to his desk. She was on a call, the door slightly open, half turned toward the window. She heard him pass. He could tell by the slight stillness in her body, the professional sonar of someone always tracking movement. He didn't look in. He kept walking. He had work to do. He had a daughter who wanted him to come home less tired. He had 30 days on a monitoring period that would resolve and then be over. And after that, the work would still be the work. And whatever was between him and Victoria would still be exactly what it was unnamed, but entirely present the most honest thing in either of their lives. He sat down. He opened his laptop. He started on the Harmon deck because Wednesday was 3 days away, and he intended to have it done in 2. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. This isn't going to just go away. Some of us think the board was too lenient, just something to consider. He stared at the message for a long moment. He didn't reply. He screenshotted it. He forwarded it to Victoria with 2 words, from unknown. She replied in under a minute. "Saving this. Thank you." Then, a second later, "Don't let it shake you." He set the phone face down. He looked at the Harmon file. He thought about Lily's face in the kitchen doorway, and about Victoria in that board meeting alone, and about the text from an unknown number designed to do exactly what it said. It wouldn't just go away. He thought no. Not the anger kind of no. The quiet, resolved, entirely certain kind. The same kind that had gotten him through his divorce, and the lean years and the portfolio submissions into the void, and the 4 a.m. ceiling staring sessions. He was not a man who could be moved by someone hiding behind an anonymous number. He opened the Harmon file. He began to work. Outside his office, the floor filled up with the ordinary noise of an ordinary Friday keyboards, and low conversations, and the distant sound of the elevator arriving. And somewhere in it, Caroline Davis moved through the space the way she always did, efficient and peripheral and watching. And Zhao had his 30 days, and whatever was coming was coming. And James Matthews stayed exactly where he was, and did exactly what he did best. He paid attention, he did the work, he waited. The 30 days passed the way hard things usually passed, not quickly, not slowly, but with the particular grinding weight of a clock you're not supposed to be watching, but can't stop watching. James kept his head down. He delivered the Harmon deck on Wednesday as promised ahead of schedule, well enough that Sarah Chen forwarded it to Victoria with a note that said simply, "This is exceptional work," and copied 3 people on the board. He ran the Miller account kickoff without a single escalation. He answered every email same day. He came in early and left late and did not under any circumstances give anyone anything to look at. It was the most disciplined he'd ever been in a professional environment. It was also quietly exhausting. The anonymous text had been the first and last. Whoever sent it had either made their point or lost their nerve. James had forwarded the screenshot to Victoria and then let it go, because carrying it would have cost him more than it cost them. And he understood the economy of that kind of thing. Caroline, for her part, had gone still. Not absent she was in every meeting she was supposed to be, and contributed in exactly the right proportion, maintained the same even professional warmth she always had. But the particular peripheral watching had dialed back, and James understood that too. She'd made her move. She was waiting to see what it produced. What it produced at the end of 30 days was a 2-paragraph memo from the board's oversight committee confirming that the review period had concluded with no findings and no recommended action. Standard language, formal, entirely bloodless. Victoria forwarded it to James with no commentary except a single period at the end of a blank line. He read it 3 times. Then, he went back to the Harmon file and kept working because the absence of a crisis was not the same as resolution. And he'd learned enough about how things worked to know that the quiet after pressure was not always peace. But it was something. It was room to breathe. He was breathing into that room on a Wednesday in late January when Sarah Chen appeared in his doorway. Sarah was a methodical person, precise, unhurried, never arriving anywhere without a reason she'd already thought through fully. James had come to respect that about her in the week she'd served as his formal reporting manager. She said what she meant, and meant what she said, and didn't use 5 words where 2 would do. So when she stood in his doorway, with the careful expression of someone carrying specific information, he put down his pen. "Close the door if you want," he said. She did. She sat down. She folded her hands on the edge of his desk, which was the Sarah Chen equivalent of a deep breath. "There's a recruiter who's been trying to reach you," she said. "Meridian Group. They called the main line and asked for you by name." James kept his face neutral. "I haven't spoken to anyone." "I know. I'm not implying anything." She held his gaze steadily. "The person who took the message brought it to me instead of you because of the current situation." She paused. "I thought you should know." "Who brought the message to you?" "One of the front desk coordinators." She paused again. "I don't think it was malicious. I think she wasn't sure of the right protocol. But it's possible someone else knows about the call. It's possible." Sarah uncrossed her hands. James, I'm going to be direct with you because I think you respond well to direct. I do. You are too good at this job to be as politically exposed as you currently are. The Harmon deck alone would have gotten you a standing ovation in most firms. She said it without flattery, which made it land harder. If Meridian is reaching out, they're reaching out because someone told them to. Someone who's seen your work and wants it. She met his eyes. That's not a threat. That's information. I appreciate it, he said. She stood. Whatever you decide, I want you to know the reporting structure this past month has been genuinely pleasant. She almost smiled. You're punctual, thorough, and you never make my job harder. Those things are rarer than they should be. She left. James sat at his desk and turned the information over in his mind. Meridian Group was not a small firm. They managed accounts in 3 cities, had a creative division that had won industry awards 2 years running, and paid, he knew this, because the industry was smaller than it seemed, and people talked significantly better than Whitmore and Associates. If they were reaching out proactively, it meant someone had done their homework. He should have felt straightforwardly good about it. A year ago, before this job, before Victoria, before the rooftop and the late nights, and all the accumulated weight of the drawer, he would have called back within the hour. Another offer meant leverage. Leverage meant options. Options meant Lily's school was less fragile, the mortgage less terrifying, the margin between fine and not fine a little wider. Instead, he sat at his desk and felt something complicated. He did not call Victoria. That was the right choice, and he knew it. His career was his career, and she had already done more than she should have had to do on his behalf. And the last thing either of them needed was for him to bring her another decision to carry. He called the recruiter himself from his cell phone, on his lunch break, standing in the wind on the plaza outside the building. Her name was Dana Kelly, and she was the kind of recruiter who was excellent at her job, which meant she made the conversation feel like 2 professionals having a collegial discussion rather than a pitch, until James understood clearly that it was very much a pitch. The creative director position at Meridian is something we believe was designed with your specific profile in mind, Dana said. I don't say that to flatter you. I say it because when the VP of brand described what he was looking for, I had your portfolio in front of me before he finished the sentence. What's the timeline? James asked. They'd want someone in place by April, which gives us time to do this right without pressure. What's the compensation structure? She told him. He listened. He didn't react, not audibly, though the number she named was considerably more than what he currently made, and landed somewhere in the vicinity of what he'd told himself in his most optimistic private moments he might make in 3 more years if things went well. I'd want to understand the full scope of the role, he said, and the team structure. Of course. We'd arrange a formal conversation with the VP before anything moves. No commitment, just a conversation. I'll think about it, he said. I'll be in touch. He hung up. The wind off the lake was cutting and direct and honest in the way Chicago wind always was. And he stood in it and thought about Lily's dinosaur bandage and Victoria's hand on his chest and the 2 paragraphs of a board memo that had said no findings, and wondered at what point in his life the obviously correct professional decision had become this complicated. He didn't tell Victoria that day, or the next. He told her Friday. Not because he'd planned it for Friday, because she found him. He was working late again. The Harmon account had moved into its execution phase, and the details required the kind of attention that was easiest at 7 p.m. when the floor was quiet. He'd thought he was alone. He usually was at 7. Victoria knocked on his open office door at 7:22, which surprised him because she'd been in board preparation meetings all afternoon, and he'd assumed she'd gone home. I saw your light on, she said. I saw yours, he said, earlier. She came in and sat down in the chair across from his desk, the geography she'd chosen that morning in her office, when she'd wanted no furniture between them. She looked tired in the way she never allowed in daylight, The honest fatigue of someone who had been managing too many things for too long. "Hard week," he said. "Hard month." She crossed her arms. Not defensively. She did it when she was cold or thinking hard, and probably both right now. "How are you doing, actually?" "Actually, not professionally. Actually." He considered the question seriously, the way she always meant it to be considered. "I'm okay," he said. "Clearer than I was a month ago." He paused. "I heard from a recruiter." She went very still. "Meridian Group," he said. "Creative director position. April start." The silence lasted about 4 seconds. He watched her face manage itself. Watched the professional layer come up, and then... And this was the thing about Victoria, the thing that he'd fallen completely in love with without any fanfare or ceremony, watched her let it back down again. "Good money?" she asked. "Very good money." "Good role?" "Looks like it." She nodded once. Her jaw was set in the way it got when she was working through something she didn't want to feel. "When's the conversation?" "I haven't scheduled it yet." She looked at him. "James, I'm telling you," he said quietly, "because you're the first person I want to tell things to. That's all this is right now. I'm not leaving. I'm not making any decisions. I wanted you to know." She held his gaze for a long moment. "Why?" "Because it's yours to know." He said it simply, directly, the way she said things. The office was very quiet. The building had its nighttime sounds, the distant machinery of the elevators, the wind against glass. And he was aware of all of it, and also aware of almost nothing except her face across the desk. "I would support you," she said finally. "Whatever you decide. I want to be clear about that." She held his eyes. "If Meridian is the right move for your life for Lily, then that's what matters." "I know that." "Do you—" "Yes." He held her gaze. "That's one of the reasons—" He stopped. "One of the reasons what?" He looked at her steadily. They were long past pretending there were things not being said. "One of the reasons this is complicated." She exhaled. She looked down at the desk for a moment at her own hands, and then back up at him. "I handled the board situation," she said. "And Caroline. And Zhao. And I would handle 100 more of those things without a second thought." She paused. "What I haven't figured out how to handle is the part where I'm asking you to stay in a situation that's complicated your life for reasons that aren't purely professional. You didn't ask me to stay. I told you to. That's different from asking." "James." Her voice was quiet and entirely serious. "You know what I mean." "I do," he said. "And I'm telling you that the complication isn't something you created. It was already there, from the first phone call." He paused. "The job was never the problem, and you were never the problem." She was quiet for a moment. "What's the problem then?" "Timing," he said. "And structure. And the fact that we both built very careful versions of ourselves, and then had the spectacular inconvenience of meeting each other." Something moved across her face, surprised almost. Then she almost laughed. "Spectacular inconvenience. That's what I've got. You're usually better with words." "I'm better with words. I'm not afraid of," he said. The honesty of that sat between them unmistakable. She didn't look away from it. "I'm afraid too," she said. And he knew it cost her the saying of it, Victoria, who had been armored since childhood, who had built herself into someone who walked into hard rooms without hesitation, who had faced a board of powerful men and given nothing away. "I'm afraid of getting it wrong, of making a decision that costs you something you can't get back." She held his gaze. "I've made decisions like that before. In my personal life. They don't leave you." "Tell me," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she did. She'd been engaged. 4 years ago, before the CEO position, before she'd been considered for it. A man who had understood her ambition in theory and struggled with it in practice, who had loved the idea of a woman who knew what she wanted, and slowly, without either of them fully seeing it happen, had begun to want her to want less. The engagement had ended not in a dramatic confrontation, but in a quiet, mutually devastating conversation in which they'd both told the truth, and understood in the telling that truth was sometimes the thing that finally closes a door. After that, she said, I decided the job was enough, that I'd made my choice, and it was a good choice, and I could be satisfied with it. She paused. And then, you walked into an interview I hadn't even formally posted, and said 3 things in the first 10 minutes that told me exactly how you think, and I thought, well. She stopped. What? He said. I thought that satisfaction wasn't the same as enough. She said it simply, and that I'd been confusing the two. The room held the silence of that with the kind of stillness that doesn't need to be filled. James leaned forward slightly. When this monitoring period closed, he said, I told myself I was going to wait until the structure was clearer, until there was less noise around us. That sounds like you. But there's always going to be noise, he said. There's always going to be structure. There's always going to be a reason to wait. He held her gaze. And I don't want to wait anymore. I'm telling you that. Not as your employee, not in this building, as myself. Victoria looked at him across the desk. The city was dark outside and the floor was empty, and there was nothing performing in either of their faces. We still work together, she said. Yes. There are still complications. There will always be complications. He didn't move. That's not an answer. She was quiet for a long moment. He waited, because waiting was one of the things he was good at, and because he knew her well enough to know that she needed space to arrive at things herself. That pressure pushed her inside, and stillness brought her out. No, she said finally. It's not an answer. She looked at him. I don't want to wait either. He nodded, just once, quietly. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. Neither of them moved dramatically. They didn't cross the desk. There was no sudden shift in the geography of the room. But something settled between them heavy, in the good way, the way things are heavy when they've finally been put in the right place. It's going to be complicated, she said again, but her voice was different now, softer, like she was describing the weather rather than building a wall. I've had complicated before, he said. I can work with complicated. She almost smiled. I know you can. She uncrossed her arms and stood. Go home, James. Lily is going to want pancakes in the morning, and you look like you need 8 hours. I'm fine. You never say you're fine when you're actually fine. You only say it when you need me to stop worrying. She picked up her bag from the chair. I'll see you Monday. Victoria. She stopped at the door. Thank you, he said, for everything this month. What you did with the board, the documentation, all of it. He paused. I don't say it enough. She turned and looked at him, and her expression was the completely unguarded one, the one he'd been cataloging for 6 months, the one that told him everything he needed to know about who she was when she wasn't performing, being herself. You don't have to say it, she said. I know. She left. He sat in the quiet office for another moment. Then he turned off his desk lamp and gathered his things and walked to the elevator. He didn't examine it too carefully on the ride down. He'd done enough examining. He let himself feel it simply the particular lightness of a weight that had been set down after a long time of carrying it. He called Mrs. Henderson from the lobby to say he'd be home by 8. He was home by 7:45. Lily was already in her pajamas, sitting at the kitchen table with a book, a habit she'd inherited from him the same way she'd inherited his attention to language and his tendency to go quiet when she was working something out. She looked up when he came through the door. You're early, she said. I am. He dropped his bag and came into the kitchen. How's the book? Good. The dog dies at the end, though, and I don't think that was necessary. It rarely is. He opened the refrigerator. Are you hungry? Mrs. Henderson made soup. She turned a page. Dad. Yeah. Are things better at work? He looked over. She was still reading, or appearing to read, which he recognized as the thing she did when she wanted the conversation to feel casual, so he'd answer honestly. "Better," he said. "Yeah, good." She turned another page. "Is your boss okay?" "She's okay." "I'm glad." Lily said it with the particular certainty of an 8-year-old who has decided something and is finished deciding it. "She sounds like the kind of person who works too hard." "She does." "Like you." "I don't work too hard." Lily looked up at him over the top of her book with an expression of complete and unconcealed skepticism. "Point taken," he said. She went back to her book. He made himself a plate and sat down across from her, and they ate in the easy quiet that was one of the things he loved most about his daughter. The way she allowed silence to be companionable, the way she didn't require noise to fill a room. After dinner, while she was brushing her teeth, he sat on the edge of her bed and thought about the Meridian offer. About the number Dana Kelly had named. About April and new beginnings and the particular temptation of a clean slate. He thought about Victoria standing at his office door at 7 p.m. because she'd seen his light on. He thought about what she'd said, "Whatever you decide. I want you to know that whatever decision you make, I'll support it." He thought about what he'd said back to her without saying it. "I know. That's the problem. That's also the answer." Lily came in from the bathroom and climbed into bed and looked at him expectantly. He reached for the book on her nightstand. They'd been working through a chapter book together, a chapter at a time for the past 2 months. He opened to where they'd left the bookmark. "Where were we?" she asked. "The part where he decides to go back," James said. "Right." She settled against her pillow. "I think he should have gone back sooner." "Why?" "Because waiting didn't make it easier. It just made it longer." She said it with the uncomplicated clarity of a child who hadn't yet learned to mistake complexity for wisdom. "Sometimes you just have to go." James looked at his daughter. "Yeah," he said. "Sometimes you do." He read 2 chapters instead of 1 because she asked him to, and then she fell asleep in the way she always did, quickly, completely like a light going off, and he sat in the dark beside her bed and listened to her breathe. Monday arrived with the particular quality of Chicago January mornings: cold, direct, entirely unsentimental. Got Lily to school and got himself to the office and was at his desk by 8:15 with a coffee and the full mental intention of a clean, ordinary, productive week. It lasted until 9:40 when Caroline Davis appeared in the open door of his office. She knocked on the frame lightly, which was more courtesy than she'd offered in recent months. "Do you have a minute?" James looked up. He read her face with the care he applied to things that required it. She looked different than she had over the past weeks. The peripheral calculation dialed down, replaced by something that was harder to name. Not softness, exactly. More like a decision. "Sure," he said. "Come in." She sat. She crossed her legs. She looked at her hands for a moment before she looked at him, which was the first time James had ever seen Caroline Davis look anywhere other than exactly where she intended to look. "I want to be straightforward with you," she said. "I appreciate that. I want you to know that the text you received, the anonymous one, didn't come from me." She said it evenly. Direct eye contact. "I want to be clear about that." James held her gaze. "Okay. I also want to acknowledge that the concerns I raised with certain board members were raised with what I believed were legitimate professional motivations." She paused. "I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm telling you what my intentions were." "What changed?" he asked. "I watched what Victoria did," she said. "When the board pushed. The documentation, the restructure." She was quiet for a moment. "I've been in this industry for 16 years, and I have watched men do exactly what she did. Build a wall with paperwork, make a concession that cost them nothing, redirect the conversation before anyone realizes what happened, and I have never watched a board call it anything other than excellent strategy." She met his eyes. "She did all of it to protect you, and they called it a conflict of interest." James said nothing. "I was wrong. Caroline said. Not entirely, but enough. She stood up. I'm not asking for anything from you. I didn't want to sit across the building from you for the rest of the fiscal year, knowing I hadn't said that. She moved toward the door. Caroline, he said. She stopped. I appreciate it, he said. Genuinely. She nodded, once the same kind of nod Victoria gave when a conversation was fully closed. Good work on the Harmon deck, she said. The Section 4 reframe was the right call. And she was gone. He sat at his desk and processed that for a long moment. Then he opened his email. Then he closed it. Then he opened it again. At 10:15, he sent a short email to Dana Kelly at Meridian Group. Thank you for the conversation last week. I've given this serious consideration, and I've decided to stay in my current position. I appreciate the opportunity and wish you and the team well. He read it twice. Sent it. He felt nothing dramatic, no great release, just the particular quiet satisfaction of a decision that had already been made somewhere deeper than words being finally put into language. His desk phone rang. He picked up. Matthews. Sarah Chen. Quick update, the Harmon client just called. They want to expand the scope of the campaign. Phase 2, double the original budget. Sarah's voice had the precise warmth of someone delivering information she's genuinely pleased about. Yeah, they specifically asked if you'd be leading the creative again. Tell them yes, James said. Already did. A pause. James, whatever you've been doing this month, keep doing it. He thanked her and hung up. He looked out through his glass office wall. Victoria's door was closed. She was in a morning call. He knew her schedule well enough to know that without looking, but through the glass, he could see the particular stillness of someone at their desk, fully focused, entirely present. He turned back to his screen. He opened the Harmon Phase 2 brief that had just arrived in his email. He started reading. The work was good. It had always been good. And now, with the noise quieted, and the decision made, and the morning doing its ordinary Monday thing around him, it felt like enough and also like more than enough, which was the specific feeling he'd been looking for without knowing it had a name. His phone buzzed. A text. Victoria's name. Harmon Phase 2. Tell me you heard. He smiled at the screen. Typed back, I heard. I'm already in the brief. A pause. Then, of course you are. Then a moment later, quieter. Glad you're here. He set the phone down. He looked at the brief. He thought about pancakes on Saturday morning, and Lily on her step stool, and the way some things built themselves while you were paying attention to other things entirely. He thought, so am I. He got back to work. February in Chicago was the month that separated the people who belonged there from the people who were still deciding. James had lived in the city long enough to belong. He knew the particular bite of February wind off the lake, the way it came at you sideways, and meant it, and he'd learned years ago to stop fighting it and just walk faster. That was Chicago's real lesson, not toughness exactly, but practicality. Keep moving. Keep your head down. Get where you're going. He was getting where he was going. The Harmon Phase 2 campaign launched in the second week of February and landed the way good work lands when it's been given the time and space it deserved. Not with fanfare, but with the quiet spreading recognition of something true. The client's VP called James directly to say it was the best work they'd seen from any agency in a decade. Sarah Chen forwarded the email to the full creative team with a note that said exactly what it needed to say and nothing more. Marcus printed it out and taped it to the break room wall, which made Elena laugh, which made James feel something warm and uncomplicated about the team he'd become part of. Victoria said nothing directly. She didn't have to. She sent him a one-line email at 8:47 p.m. on the night the campaign went live. There it is. He read it and understood exactly what she meant, the way he understood most things she said. Not just the surface of it, but the weight under it, the satisfaction of watching something become what it was always supposed to be. He replied, there it is. That was how things were between them now. Not changed exactly, but no longer pretending to be what they weren't. The drawer was open. Nothing was rushing out of it. Nothing dramatic or reckless, but neither of them was pushing it closed anymore. They were careful the way adults are careful when they've both been through enough to know that care is not the same as distance. They were honest in the specific way you can only be honest with someone who has already seen the parts of you that you use to manage carefully. It was, James thought, the most genuinely peaceful professional relationship of his entire adult life. And also, the most complicated. Those things could both be true. He had learned to let them. The playground was Lily's idea. She had lobbied for it with the particular systematic persistence of a child who understood that parental resistance was mostly a matter of timing, that the right ask at the right moment was simply a question of patience. She'd waited until a Saturday in late February, when the temperature had climbed to a relatively tolerable 38 degrees, and James had made pancakes, and she'd eaten too, and was in the specific good mood that came from a morning with no obligations. "Can we go to Riverside?" she asked over the last of her syrup. "It's February, Lily." "It's almost March." "It's not almost March. It's closer to March than it is to January." She said it with the precision of someone who had prepared for this exact counter-argument. He looked at her over his coffee cup. 10 degrees warmer, and you've got a deal." The temperature hit 41 on Saturday. Lily appeared in his doorway at 8 a.m., wearing her coat and her expression of absolute certainty, and James laughed and said fine, and found his own coat. He hadn't planned to invite Victoria. He'd mentioned the playground to her the week before in passing, one of those casual, end-of-the-day conversations that had become the natural texture of their days when the work was done and the floor was empty, and they talked the way they'd always talked about everything and nothing easily. She'd said, "I haven't been to a park in years, real years. Not the kind you say as an expression." He'd said, "That's a problem." She'd said, "Most of my problems are of my own construction." He'd said, "Saturday. Riverside. 40 degrees or above." She'd looked at him for a moment, the real look, the unguarded one. Then, she'd said, "I'll check the forecast." She was already there when they arrived, sitting on one of the benches at the edge of the playground with both hands wrapped around a coffee cup, looking at the bare, branched trees, like someone taking them seriously. She was wearing a coat he'd never seen, gray, practical, entirely unlike what she wore to the office. And she looked different without the architecture of work around her. Younger, less assembled, more herself. Lily spotted her before James could say anything. "Is that her?" Lily said, not quietly. "Lily, it is, isn't it?" Not a question. She was already walking faster. Followed at a pace that was not quite a jog, and told himself it was fine, this was fine. Lily was a child, and children were direct, and there was nothing to manage here. Victoria looked up when she heard them coming. She stood the instinctive movement of someone accustomed to meetings, people approaching things beginning. Then she stopped and looked at Lily, and the public face didn't assemble itself this time. Instead, her expression was something open and a little uncertain, the way she looked when she encountered things she hadn't fully prepared for. Lily stopped in front of her. She looked up with the complete, unself-conscious attention she gave to things that interested her. "You're Victoria," she said. "I am," Victoria said. "And you're Lily." "My dad talks about work different since you hired him." Lily delivered this as pure information, no editorial. "He comes home less tired." Victoria glanced at James. He raised an eyebrow. "I'm glad to hear that," Victoria said. And she meant it in the particular way she meant things entirely without performance. "Do you like pancakes?" Lily asked. "I do, actually." "We already had them this morning, but we can have them again tomorrow if you want." Lily said it with the generous authority of a child offering the best thing she had. "Dad makes really good ones. He does the blueberry kind." "Lily," James said. "What?" She might not know that. Victoria was doing the thing, the trying not to smile thing, the small internal struggle visible only to someone who knew her face well. James knew her face very well. "That's a generous offer," Victoria said. "We should go on the swings." Lily said, pivoting with the conversational agility of an 8-year-old. You can push me. And just like that, they were on the swings. James sat on the bench Victoria had vacated and watched his daughter instruct his. He didn't have the word yet, or he had too many words, none of which were simple enough for a February Saturday at a playground. Watched his daughter instruct Victoria on the precise mechanics of a proper push. Victoria listened with the same focused attention she gave to quarterly projections, and then pushed. And Lily went up and came back laughing, and James sat on the bench and felt something so simple. It almost surprised him with its simplicity. This was what he'd been working toward. Not the job, not the campaign, not the cleared board review, or the Meridian offer declined. This specific Saturday morning, this specific laughing. Victoria came and sat beside him on the bench after a few minutes, while Lily moved to the climbing structure with the decisive focus of someone who has extracted maximum value from the swing and is ready for the next challenge. She's something, Victoria said. She's everything, James said. And she knows it. Gets that from you. She's better than me. You always say that. I'm always right, Victoria smiled. She was watching Lily navigate the climbing structure with the expression of someone recalibrating a previous understanding. She asked me if I like pancakes. I heard. She invited me to breakfast tomorrow. I heard that too. He paused. I apologize. Don't. She turned and looked at him. Don't apologize for her. She said it quietly but directly. She's honest. Honest is good. Oh. Sat side by side on the bench in the February cold, and Lily climbed and jumped and came back periodically to deliver reports. The climbing structure had a loose bolt that an adult should probably look at. A boy from her class had apparently been here earlier, but had left the far slide was faster than the near one by a significant margin. Victoria listened to every report with complete seriousness. She asked clarifying questions. She offered informed opinions on the relative merits of fast versus slow slides. Lily regarded her with the evaluative intensity she reserved for things she was deciding about, and then, apparently deciding, pulled her toward the far slide to demonstrate. James watched them go. He thought about his ex-wife, about the divorce that had been right and still hard, about the years of building the two-person world he and Lily inhabited, contained reliable theirs. He'd built it carefully, and he'd protected it carefully, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he'd told himself it was complete, that the shape of it was set. He understood now that he'd been wrong. Not about the protection Lily deserved every wall he'd built, but about the completeness. A life wasn't complete because it was safe. It was complete because it was true. He stood up from the bench when they came back from the slide. Lily's face open with the particular delight of cold air and speed. Victoria slightly breathless in a way he'd never seen her at the office. The far slide is definitively faster, Victoria said. Data confirmed, Lily said. She looked between them both. Then she looked at James with the unsettling accuracy she'd had since she was 5 years old. Dad, she said. Say the thing. He blinked. What thing? The thing you don't say. She shrugged, entirely comfortable with the weight of what she was asking. I can tell you have one. He looked at his daughter. Then he looked at Victoria. Victoria was watching him with the expression he'd catalogued 100 times, and finally knew the name for open, careful hoping, and trying not to show that she was hoping. I love her, he said. He said it to Lily because Lily had asked, and because Lily was 8, and deserved truth instead of performance. But he said it looking at Victoria because that was where it was true. The playground was quiet for a moment. The February wind moved through the bare branches. Lily considered this with the gravity of a person receiving significant information. I know, she said. I've known for a long time. Then she turned and went back toward the climbing structure. James and Victoria stood on the cold ground and looked at each other. She's going to be a lawyer, Victoria said quietly. Or a CEO. God help us both, he said. She looked at him. Her eyes were very steady and very clear and entirely unguarded. "I love you too," she said. "Since you're being honest." "Since I'm being honest," he agreed. She didn't move toward him, and he didn't move toward her because there was a child 30 feet away on a climbing structure, and this was a public park, and they were both people who understood that some things deserved the right moment rather than the nearest moment. But she held his gaze, and he held hers, and the distance between them, which had been measured and maintained and carefully managed for 7 months, finally stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like something about to change. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," he said. "Pancakes," she said. "The blueberry kind." He almost laughed. "The blueberry kind." She looked over at Lily, then back at him. "I'm going to be nervous," she said. "I want you to know that in advance so you can adjust your expectations accordingly." "You're never nervous." "I'm always nervous. I just decide what to do about it before it shows." She looked at him directly. "This time, I might not be able to hide it." "I know." He held her gaze. "I'll make good coffee." She nodded. The small, real smile. The one that got away from her. Lily called from the climbing structure. "Are you guys just going to stand there?" "Apparently not," James called back. They walked over together. Sunday morning arrived with the specific quality of Sundays that have something in them, not the blank leisure of an ordinary Sunday, but the lit, anticipatory feeling of a day that carries weight. James was up at 7. He had the coffee started and the batter mixed before Lily appeared in the kitchen, in her pajamas hair, loose, still carrying the book she'd apparently been reading in bed. "She's coming at 9, Lily confirmed, dropping into her chair. "She's coming at 9. "Is she going to be nervous?" James paused mid-stir. "Why would you ask that?" "Because people get nervous about important things." Lily opened her book. "And this is an important thing." He looked at his daughter. "When did you get like this?" She looked up. "Like what?" "Like you understand everything." She considered this with appropriate seriousness. "I think I've always been like this," she said. "You were just distracted." He turned back to the batter. Victoria arrived at 9:02. She knocked. She texted from the lobby asking if she should knock or ring the bell, which was the detail that told him exactly how nervous she was, that she'd considered the door protocol for long enough to ask about it. He texted back knock. She knocked. She was carrying coffee from the cart downstairs, the good kind 3 cups, which meant she'd thought about Lily too. She stood in his doorway in the same practical gray coat and looked at him with the expression of someone who had decided to stop managing themselves for the duration of this visit. "Hi," she said. "Hi." He stepped back. "Come in." She came in. She looked at his apartment not evaluatively, but curiously with genuine attention. He watched her take it in the bookshelf that had too many books, the kitchen table that had homework on one end, and a cleared space for eating on the other, the drawing Lily had made last year, that he'd framed and hung by the window because it was good, actually, and deserved to be framed. The shape of the life he'd built visible and unpolished, and his. "It's exactly what I pictured," she said quietly. "What did you picture?" "A home," she said. "Not a house. An actual home." "Hey!" Lily appeared in their kitchen doorway, drawn by the knock and the voices and the particular alertness she had for important things. She looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at her. "You brought coffee," Lily said. "One for your dad, one for me, and one that's mostly warm milk with a little bit of coffee, because I didn't know exactly what you liked," Victoria said. "But I guessed you'd want to be included." Lily looked at her with an expression that James recognized as the highest form of approval available from his daughter. Quiet, certain, final. "Good guess," she said. She took the cup. "Dad puts blueberries on top of the pancakes, not in them. Just so you know." "I'll remember that." "It's the right way to do it." Lily carried her cup back to the kitchen table, and her book, the matter settled. James and Victoria stood in the hallway and looked at each other. "She approved of the coffee," he said. "I noticed." Victoria exhaled slowly. "Okay, good." You're nervous." "Extremely," she said. "Is it showing?" "Only to me." She held his gaze for a moment. "Only you," she agreed. He hung up her coat. She followed him into the kitchen, and he stood at the stove and made pancakes the blueberry kind, on top, and she sat at the table across from Lily and they talked. Not about anything significant. About the book Lily was reading, and about the dog she wanted, and had named preemptively Diego, and about the school project on architecture that was due in 2 weeks and that Lily had opinions about. Victoria listened and asked the right questions and didn't perform interest. She was simply interested the same way she was interested in everything she deemed worth her attention. And Lily, who had her father's gift for knowing the real thing from the performed thing, bloomed right in front of him. He stood at the stove and watched it happen. The particular opening of his daughter in the presence of someone who was simply paying attention to her, and the particular way Victoria leaned forward slightly, when Lily said something sharp or funny, the way she registered it in her whole face. He flipped the pancakes. He thought, this is the thing behind the thing. Not the job, not the board, not the monitoring period or the anonymous text or the 30 days of careful professional navigation. This kitchen, this Sunday morning, this specific convergence of the life he'd built and the life he hadn't dared to imagine building. He plated the pancakes. He brought them to the table. He sat down between his daughter and the woman he loved and poured too much syrup, which was the only way Lily would allow it. And they ate. The conversation moved the way it does in kitchens on Sunday mornings, easily without agenda, without arrival or departure, just the current of it. Victoria told Lily about a building she'd seen in New York, with an entire wall of windows that faced a park, which led to Lily explaining her architecture project in full detail, which led to a 15-minute collaborative discussion about whether buildings should try to blend in or stand out, which ended with Lily declaring firmly that standing out was always better. Why, Victoria asked. Because blending in is just hiding, Lily said. And hiding is only good when you're playing a game. Victoria looked at James over Lily's head. Something moved between them. That particular private frequency that had been building for 7 months, the one that operated below the level of words. He felt it clearly now. Not the complicated version, not the careful, managed, drawer-locked version. Just the simple version. The one that said here, this. After breakfast, Lily disappeared to her room to work on the architecture project, which she announced would require concentration and relative quiet. She said it with the authority of someone assigning tasks, looked at them both, and left. James and Victoria sat at the cleared table with their coffee cups and the comfortable disarray of a finished meal. "She's incredible," Victoria said. "She is. She knows exactly what she's doing, by the way." "I know."
She very deliberately left the room. "She's been doing that since she was 6, he said.
She calls it giving people space, to be honest. She invented the concept herself. Victoria looked at him. Then she set down her coffee cup and said with the directness she applied to everything that mattered, "I want to do this right. Whatever this is, I want to be careful about Lily, about what she sees and what she comes to rely on." She held his gaze. "I'm not afraid of complicated. I've told you that. But I am asking you. I am genuinely asking you, not as your employer, not as anything professional. Are you sure?" He looked at her across the table. He thought about every moment of the past 7 months, the rooftop, the almost kiss. If you were sober, I would have made the first move. The board meeting, the monitoring period, the playground, this kitchen, this Sunday, this woman. "I've been sure," he said, "for longer than I knew how to say." Her jaw relaxed by a degree. Her shoulders held precisely as always, came down slightly. She looked at him with the completely open face. No armor, no assembly, no performance. And he thought it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. From down the hall, Lily's voice carried clearly, "I can hear you being quiet. That means it went well." Victoria laughed. The real one, the full one, the one that got away from her entirely. It filled the kitchen and stayed there warm and entirely itself. James looked at his daughter's closed door, and then back at the woman across the table, and thought about blueberry pancakes and February playgrounds, and the particular way life assembled itself when you stopped being afraid of what it was assembling into. There was still work tomorrow. There would always be work tomorrow. There would be complicated structures and professional careful distances, and the ongoing imperfect navigation of two people who shared an office building and now shared a Sunday kitchen table. There would be Lily's homework, and Lily's questions, and Lily's unsettling accuracy about everything. There would be Zhao and his 30-day monitoring periods, and Caroline Davis's professional sonar, and all the ordinary machinery of a world that didn't stop turning, because two people had decided to stop pretending. None of that was resolved. None of it would resolve cleanly. That was not how real things worked. But James Matthews had spent enough of his life waiting for clean resolution to understand that it was not actually the thing he'd been waiting for. This was the thing he'd been waiting for, right here. Sunday morning, coffee going cold on the table, the sound of his daughter down the hall constructing a presentation about buildings that stand out instead of hiding. The woman across from him looking at him without any of the distances they'd built and maintained, and finally sat down. He reached across the table and took her hand. She turned it over and held his back. Outside Chicago did what Chicago always did, indifferent, direct, constant. The wind moved, the city turned. The morning went on. And inside the kitchen of a man who had learned slowly, and at some cost, that the right life was not the careful one, but the true one, two people sat across from each other in the particular warmth of a thing that had found its name. That was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.